The summer movie season is well underway. It is shaping up to be one of the best seasons for fans of hero worship, with many box office blockbusters, including The Matrix Reloaded, Bruce Almighty, and X2 X-Men United. There are also plenty of other celluloid heroes, such as a hulking green monster, three angels with sass, a cyborg who might run for governor of California, and, of course, a tiny fish who's a whale of a guy. Here's a look at some of the summer's big films.
I'm so sorry. See, I suffer from short-term memory loss.
Short-term memory loss? I don't believe this.
No, it's true. I forget things almost instantly. It runs in my family. Well, I mean, at least I think it does. Where are they?
Look at us. Our horse is too small, our jockey is too big, our trainer is too old, and I'm too dumb to know the difference.
Someone is after this ancient artifact.
Pandoras Box.
Her Majesty formally requests that you find and recover this box before it's too late.
Oh. Well, now that I have Her Majesty's permission.
What is your mission? To ensure the survival of John Connor. You are about to fail that mission. You see that? They throwing cars. How am I not see that?
Two parties, one mall. I love this town.
Who she thinks she is, Beckham or what? Can we test it like him? You know, give it some bounce.
Test it, just go on, test it.
Oh!
Gentlemen, milady, you will always remember this as the day that you almost caught Captain Jack.
I used to think you were one of a kind, Wolverine. I was wrong.
Mommy believes you did it, and she believes you should go to jail, and she believes that she deserves everything that's left, and you shouldn't have any part of it. I honestly have to tell you, anything that she decides, I can't trust.
3, 2, 1, drop it!
Come on! Sinbad!
Sinbad?
Yeah.
To stop him, you must lead a team like nothing the world has seen.
Cheers.
Extraordinary gentleman indeed.
This past weekend's number one movie, the box office Charlie's Angels, made $37 million, and there are still more big hits to come with Johnny Depp, Sean Connery, Jennifer Lopez, Nick Cage, Ben Affleck, and Tobey Maguire, just to name a few. Joining me now for consideration of all this is A.O. Scott from the New York Times, from Time Magazine, Richard Corliss, Lisa Schwarzbaum from Entertainment Weekly, and from the New Yorker magazine, David Denby. Welcome. Let me just start this by going around and just tell me what you really like that's coming up this summer.
That's coming up.
It's either here or coming up somewhere. A summer movie, as we say.
A summer movie that's coming up in August that I like quite a bit is a smaller movie called American Splendor.
I keep hearing about this.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Very unusual movie based on the life of this guy, Harvey P. Carr, who's a filing clerk at a Cleveland hospital who started writing comic books about his daily life many years ago, and played by Paul Giamatti in just a really wonderful performance. And a very quirky, odd, very humane, just very captivating movie.
David?
Capturing the Friedmans, I think, is one of the most remarkable documentaries we've seen here in like 10 or 15 years. And it seems like totally unlikely hit film about the dissolution of a family. It's as if Eugene O'Neill reimagined the Jewish family in Great Neck. Yeah. And people don't want to leave the theater, I've been hearing, that they're so intrigued by it because it's a kind of intellectual puzzle, trying to figure out who's telling the truth and who isn't, that it's hard to clear them out. They want to talk to their neighbors. And it could become an interesting commercial story because it's opening nationally and it's doing very well all over.
It's one of those movies everybody wants to talk about when they walk out of it.
They
what
absolutely have to talk about it. People call, it's amazing.
The big one that opened the summer that had us all hopeful was Finding Nemo, which I think will hold throughout the year as one of the best movies of the year.
Why is it so good?
It is Pixar. Nobody matches Pixar right now. They are in a league of their own in terms of the quality of the work they do, the humor, the beauty of their animation, the story, the voices they have. It's interesting, you know, we have a clip of Sinbad here, and we can talk later comparing DreamWorks' Sinbad to this, but Finding Nemo is so lovely. It works for adults, it works for kids. It's interesting, too, because Tony and David are mentioning small films, and I have a feeling we four are going to be talking about a lot of smaller films that are actually more interesting than the blockbusters.
And doing well at the box office.
For example, Spellbound, which is about the National Spelling Bee. Sounds completely dull, is doing lovely business, is a lovely documentary, and people, as you say, it's word of mouth, and people are telling other people, and it's one of the delights of the summer.
And families are going, and they're, I mean, 10 and 11-year-old kids I know
and that is the secret of the summer, I think, that what's really happening is people are going by word of mouth.
Dr. Corliss?
Well, 3 of the top 25 grossing pictures in the last week were documentaries, which I wonder when the last time that happened. My favorite of the top 25 box office films.
That's why he's Dr. Corliss.
Docu Corliss.
What was the third one?
I don't know. That's why I'm on.
Was it Michael Moore's film still hanging on? Michael Moore's film still hanging on? Well, anyway,
I think
so.
Is it Winged Migration?
Winged Migration.
Winged Migration, which may indicate that after reality television, there is a higher form, reality movies, or that films have become so cartoonish in a way that one of the most mature films of the summer is indeed Finding Nemo, which for me is the class of the mass market, and it's Pixar's never done it wrong yet. They have a streak, 5 films, 5 terrific films. But with just the slightest twist on the standard Disney cartoon format, which is a lost child, but this time we track the parent who's trying to find the child, so we get all that anxiety. It's a mature film.
Tell me, does Pixar actually create the movie, and are they? I mean,
it's totally Pixar.
Pixar is everything.
Yes, and they are the talent, and they are the people to pay the money to, because
John Lasseter is the man who created Toy Story and A Bug's Life and a sequel, and Andrew Stanton is another one of these benign madmen.
And it's a cartoon. It is a cartoon, and you know, it's funny because we're talking about the summer as having comic book movies, some of which work, some of which don't. If it's X-Men 2 or if it's the Hulk. See, I blocked on the big green Hulk already. Yeah. But Finding Nemo, which is, of course, also a cartoon, is completely different than that, and you can't even lump that in with any of the other. You know, you talk about, it's the summer of big, dumb fun. Finding Nemo is deep fun, and that really, I think, is the secret.
Everybody agrees on this. I mean, Finding Nemo is
great actors in it. Albert Brooks finally found that his anxious over-insistence in real life flesh can be very trying. But he finally, as a fish, he's fabulous.
Well, and I think that Willem Dafoe, too, recreating his role in Platoon.
I would say that the actors, as you know, in cartoons, actors come into the studio years before or months at least before the film is actually made, and the images are fit to their voices, so they may make 12 visits to the studio. But to me, Albert Brooks and Ellen DeGeneres, Willem Dafoe, and the others bring so much character to it, and of course they have characters to inhabit, that they are giving greater performances than, say, the Charlie's Angels gals, who are basically fitting themselves into cartoon shapes.
And I think there's so much more care in the writing and the conception of the characters and the story and the adventures that they're having. I mean, there's just much more complete filmmaking in Finding Nemo than certainly than in the Hulk.
And also, though, I think it's because it was told to tell a story. And one of the things that's happening with sequels is that they're made to fill a sequel. And so they're thinking, what can they churn out next? What's the next story that we can do for Legally Blonde or for Charlie's Angels or for any of these movies, that Lara Croft 2? Do we really want to see a second story from these? But they're thinking, well, financially it makes a certain amount of sense to try and do that. But creatively, it's missing something, which is why, for me, the things that work this summer, they could be big, dumb fun, but they tell a story and they're not there just to crank out more product.
We'll come back to sequels in a moment, but let me talk about the 2 big movies, at least 3 of them, that one is Terminator 3, the other is Hulk. the Hulk generally is a disappointment to almost everybody.
Yes.
Now, and because Ang Lee was expected to do something unique and different.
Well, Crouching Tiger was incredibly beautiful, and this is sort of a sad step backward because Crouching Tiger was done live action. There was a little digital painting, a little finishing of the image, but it was basically live action. It was both airborne and gravity bound at the same time. The characters had some depth and density. Here you finally get the monster, and after an enormous psychological build-up, and it's nothing.
Didn't he himself say that this is going to be the biggest independent film of all time? That he warned audiences about this, which is a danger to forget that a comic book is a comic book first and foremost, even if you have Freud behind
meaning
it.
he took himself too seriously? You think?
I think so.
It's serious in all the wrong ways.
In all
that
ways,
way.
and I think that there's a combination of that kind of serious, ponderous, here we're going to have these Oedipal themes and these mythic resonances, and also a kind of condescension toward the material, the idea that, well, it's a comic book, so how hard could it be to make a, to make a great comic book
movie for people who don't really think very much of comic book movies, which actually condescends to the form, I think.
I agree, and underestimates how difficult it is to make a really effective,
exactly, which is why X-Men 2
movie.
Works, and why Hulk doesn't.
Ang Lee's movies have always been too serious for the form. He made his martial arts film was more serious than any other, but it had a poetry and a buoyancy that
this is Crouching Tiger or something.
Yes,
like
that it made it by far the top-grossing foreign language movie ever. Yeah. But he also made his Western, if you recall, and that was Ride with the Devil, and that was to Westerns what the Hulk is to action pictures, which is to say he loves characters who find their inner demon and then can't resolve it. I believe David in his reviews said that the monster never discovers the joy of smashing things.
He says he does, but you don't feel
Maybe
it.
this is a first here. We're having one critic.
You don't feel it.
Quoting
you don't
another.
feel the joy. Yeah.
But I think the character and Ang Lee are too gentlemanly, too buttoned up, if you will, that even when they're released, they don't enjoy smashing things.
And saying so much
should
about
people
Ang
enjoy
Lee and
smashing
Ang Lee.
things, even when they're monsters?
Well, that's the dangerous. I mean, if you're not going to make jokes about the Schwanzstücker as Mel Brooks did, if not going to be silly about the monster, then convey the terror of
the silliness
of power.
comes in that his underpants grow with him.
So
yes,
that was bizarre.
That was a scoop. Charlie, though, it's interesting because you mentioned T3 also, and that, I think, is a movie that knows exactly what size it's supposed to be. It is very pleased with itself, and it's very fun. And I think Schwarzenegger is so canny and savvy in realizing that he is bringing back this old, clanking 1980s franchise, and he is much older now, and he can't do what he did, and we're looking at him to study whatever has been done to him. And there's a sense of humor about it that I think worked beautifully for it.
Well, it doesn't aspire beyond itself. It's certainly less pretentious than
great.
The Matrix Reloaded
what else do you
or
want
than
this summer?
the Hulk.
Okay, but the pretension of Matrix Reloaded, did they achieve beyond that pretension something that still makes it a unique and changed a movie that in its first edition changed the way movies are made, some said?
The first one did, and I think part of the problem with the second one was where to go from there. I mean, you had an enormous surprise with the first Matrix, both in the way that it was done, the way that it combined that bullet time animation, and also
all the philosophy and all that sort of played.
And the revelation of how these levels of reality were integrated. Once you can't sort of reveal that anymore, you have what feels like interminable exposition. I mean, it was like sitting through a kind of graduate seminar for the first hour of that movie, just listening to these people talking, thinking, well, do I have to take notes? I mean, is this going to be?
Yes, you do.
Is this in the term paper?
The third movie has already been made, has it?
Yes, it has been.
Okay,
yes.
but let me just. Are you saying, Tony, that you like the movie, but it's nowhere nearly as good as the first one, or you didn't just like it?
No,
period?
I did not like the movie.
Okay.
I did not like.
David, did you like it or not like it?
No, I didn't like it either. We were all saying beforehand that the blockbuster system could be approaching a point of collapse, and of course we could be wrong next week. But the whole thing's front-loaded.
Be out of your theory.
Okay. The whole thing's front-loaded, right, for the Friday opening. All the promotion is aggregated. Virtually the whole press colludes, I think, in this very destructive way of releasing movies. And then
David.
These are promise, I promise, I promise.
And people who, wait, just let me finish.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
people who go the first weekend tend to be males aged 15 to 25. So the tastes of those people
Are
is
dictating the movies that are made.
disproportionate in relation to their size and the actual movie audience. So you see, and so it's nuts. And sometimes if these things don't click, they fall off 60, 70%. Now, when it works financially, you know, like the Harry Potter series or Lord of the Rings, it all seems to make sense. The rest of the year, it seems to be utterly destructive.
You want to say what? In opposition to that point.
I wanted to say that it seems like you have an economic theory rather than talking about the variety, the different kinds of quality that's available this summer, which is not economically driven. We were also talking before we sat down to talk to Charlie about all of these other movies that are out that are not trying to be blockbusters and are doing so beautifully well. And so, I don't know. I think that thinking about how they're crunching the numbers is not where we should be going.
Okay, but I'm not sure that's in contradiction to what he said. Is it?
No,
because
they're complementary, I think.
They're complementary, too.
Yes, also, we may, and again, not to talk numbers too much, but we may call 28 Days Later the low-budget zombie-eating
Okay, you've been
movie.
on 28 Days Later, so tell me what
a
it is.
hit, and Charlie's Angels a flop. Both opened last week, and Charlie's Angels made 4 times as much.
Right.
But it's in the expectations of that.
Sometimes the numbers are capable of measuring the enthusiasm of the audience, not just that people went to see it. I mean, if you open a movie like Charlie's Angels on, 4,000 screens or however much it was, that initial number reflects, as David was saying, a sort of, initial curiosity and response to the hype. But if you open 28 Days Later on many, many fewer screens and it makes even a quarter as much, that's representing, I think, a much more of a kind of groundswell and a much more, I think, a less conditioned response, perhaps, to
Did you like 28 Days?
Yeah, very much. I thought...
Because?
Well, I thought it was a very effectively scary movie. And...
It's about?
It's about this guy wakes up and the city of London has been almost entirely wiped out by this virus, and these infected people are running around. They're sort of like cannibalistic zombies trying to infect the uninfected, and he's in this London that's almost completely deserted, and it's very eerie and very spooky the way that it's shot in these just empty streets. And he bands together on digital video, on one of the most, I think, beautifully shot DV movies that has come out. Yeah, the cinematographer is Anthony Dodd Mantle, who's done a bunch of Dogma movies, who has just a real eye for how to make this medium beautiful and strange and spooky. So it's sort of
punishing, Charlie.
It's scary.
It is punishing. It's dark. It's dank. It's damp.
But it's zombies.
But it's done well.
It should be.
It's Night of the Living Dead, meets On the Beach. Remember On the Beach with the empty sets? Yeah.
Fred Astaire.
Yeah, right. And they keep coming at you.
No one dances here.
And it's,
but it is effective. I agree.
It's effective, and I think also we're talking about the sort of the pretentiousness of the Hulk or the Matrix Reloaded. This is a movie that has some some ideas and maybe some pretensions toward being about human nature and human extinction.
SARS. I mean, it was made way before all of that, but obviously people can relate it to that.
But it sort of develops all those themes kind of on the fly, and in the course of delivering some very spooky and disturbing entertainment.
And who's the director?
Danny Boyle,
who made the
Train
Spotting.
Yeah.
And
The Beach, based on a novel by
Alex
Garland, who wrote the script for this film.
The movie I anticipate most, me personally, is Seabiscuit. Has anybody here
Here's
seen
your guy to talk to.
We've only
His
seen the
hand
trailer.
has
I'm not at liberty to
stayed.
say, Charlie.
that you've seen it?
I am at liberty to say I've seen
But
it.
you're not at liberty to say what? Tell me what. Give me some sense of maybe we'll.
I saw a rough cut
Excuse you.
and was told if I
Mention what
were
it's
to
like.
review the film, that I would have to see it again.
Well, that doesn't seem like a punishment.
Oh, that's okay.
No, it's just
Now,
that
is Seabiscuit going to be a cover story in Time magazine or
No.
something?
You're at liberty to say
I'm not.
that.
I have no
Yeah.
decision on that.
But can you tell me
He's
whether?
no Ben Franklin.
Okay.
Let's put it that way.
It's no Ben.
Hold it up again.
but who is?
Walter, one more time. Okay, so but what can you tell us?
I
You can tell us who the stars are.
I can say it's Rocky as a horse.
Is it really?
Yes.
But more intelligent is the line.
But more intelligent, said the young actress Elizabeth Banks, who appears
Who's
in the
in the
film.
movie.
It's
That
the
the
real
horse
life
is more
story.
intelligent.
Is, if you all know it, the real
Yeah.
life story.
It's a great story.
Is
And it's a brilliant
couldn't be
book.
more
And
melodramatic.
it's a brilliant book.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just curious as to why this is the one that you're most interested in. Is this?
No, I love
this
the,
is a
I
good,
love
but
the
this
book.
is a good study because this is it. But it's just based on the book. Okay.
The book.
You're from horse country?
Well, I'm familiar with horses.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks
I
great.
just love the story. I love the story.
attraction.
It's an American story.
Yeah.
And it's very well cast. Tobey Maguire plays the young jockey who has any number of ailments, and Jeff Bridges is the owner, and Chris Cooper is the trainer.
Which is great casting.
It's a very classic cast.
Just knowing the book, those three people are perfect. I would think in casting. If I was a director, they would. Let me just say that the thing I've seen Capturing the Friedmans, it is stunningly brilliant. I thought it was one of the most compelling documentaries I had seen in a long time. I think that, and I think Andrew Jarecki is just extraordinary being who I like a lot. It is also a documentary that had the great luck to have had all of these home movies to have been made. Without
Found
them,
treasure.
That's right. There's a found
Amazing.
treasure.
Yes.
So in other words, if somebody had been secretly on their own, never knowing that they would be part of a documentary, making movies about every important idea in their life, and some not so important, God,
it's as if
and for that to drop in his lap after. And this is a guy who started out to make a movie about a clown.
That's right.
That's right. It's as if also the secrets of the family history were inscribed in these successive layers of technology going backwards, through 8mm films all the way to stills. It's a kind of archaeology of a family.
It comes back to the idea that we can tell, and not just critics, but anyone who goes to a movie can tell something that is riveting and good, and they are going to tell somebody else. So whether it's Nowhere in Africa, or it's Spellbound, or it's Swimming Pool for those people who like that. That is the real story of the summer. Summer is where you tell each other.
It is the best. I mean, what I just loved about it. I mean, the characters are A, so real, and B, they have this I don't give a and about what they say.
Yeah.
And it is unforced,
You need a
unedited.
certain kind of personality, though. For any cinema verite, you need people who can become exhibitionists.
Every great documentary needs a great character at the core. Whatever it is.
But the people need a certain showmanship even when they're exposing their.
Well, and this is, I think saying, Eugene O'Neill is a good analogy. And what I think is so extraordinary about what Jarecki did in the way that he edited is that your sympathy and your disgust about the characters changes. I mean, you're always, you find yourself thinking about the mother, Elaine Friedman, for a while as this sort of, cold, monstrous figure. And then you begin to think, or I did at least, well, why are they all ganging up on her? Why is the movie participating in this? And your sympathy comes around a little bit more toward her. And it's such a complex and disturbing experience. And I think Lisa's right. It shows that audiences are, if it's well done, are receptive to that. And people don't mind seeing things that may trouble them, that may bother them, that may provoke them, that may do all of the things that these blockbusters and sequels are precisely designed not to do.
Has it been a good year for movies?
No.
Year or summer?
Well, it's too early to say.
So far as I'm just summer. I'm not saying the year so far.
The quality is held for the autumn leaves Oscar season. Every
so
year.
They're holding back the
IQ of the audience suddenly goes up 60 points, on November 15th.
If you'd asked us last year at this time,
we would say the same thing.
Oh God, it's miserable. And then if you'd asked us at the end of December, we would have said, my God, we had the.
And I'm not of the it's terrible year. I think it's as varied as it always is, only there's more of it and louder. And for every Nemo, there's something crummy, and it's ever thus. I don't feel a tremendous difference. In fact, I feel a balancing of the small and the large that I find hopeful. Tony, you mentioned American Splendor, which I am most looking forward to also, which is, I think, a tremendous discovery of American filmmaking. And is it big? Is it small? Doesn't matter. It's like nothing else anyone has seen.
Why is it Tony? Go ahead. Tell me why it's great one more time.
Well, I mean, in a way, it's similar to Capturing the Friedmans, not in its subject matter or its approach, but in that it finds a kind of new way to tell this story. It's based in reality, and it combines. I mean, Harvey Pekar is actually in it, and he's also played by Paul Giamatti. And it finds a way to take his material, which is very anecdotal, very almost very slight. I mean, he writes these comic strips about, nothing going on, about going to work and talking with his coworkers. And the movie, in a way that I as someone who had read these comic books for a long time and really loved them, thought wouldn't have been possible, finds a way to capture that tone, without seeming small, without seeming anecdotal. It sort of finds the strangeness and the poetry and the humanity, and also doesn't condescend. I mean, here's a guy who could easily be a kind of, target for a sort of, very knowing, condescending, ironic of look at these funny, ordinary people in Cleveland and how odd they are. And it's not that at all. It's about.
Interestingly, it's made by documentarians,
yes,
not feature filmmakers, which is so they have that same point of view of putting together the personal story.
Yeah, and it seems to follow in a sort of trendlet maybe of that maybe began with Crumb, with Terry Zweigoff's.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
Of these movies that come out of and Crumb has collaborated with Harvey Pekar a lot in the past, and is in there's a character.
And Terry Zweigoff also went from a documentary to a fiction film.
Yes, that was based on an underground comic book that was Ghost World. So there does seem to be an interesting little kind of formation here, or a nexus between movie making and these comic books.
So you see what happens, Charlie. You want to talk about the big movies. You're asking us about the big movies, and we keep twisting it back because I mean, we might agree that in a summer like this, which just by coincidence has many more sequels than so-called original action films. Last year had fewer sequels. And so there's less excitement about it. My colleague Richard Schickel said to me 20 years ago, the problem with summer movies is not that they're bad movies that you have to write about, it's that they're the same bad movie. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, although the Hulk has different bizarre qualities from T3 or X2, they are part of this large machine. And so our job is talking about these movies, and our mission is talking about the smaller ones. And I guess I would mention.
He's still on the small movies.
Yeah. Well,
but
since you came around, since you were going around the table, I will say that a small movie that I would recommend is the French film The Man from the Train or On the Train, with wonderful performances by two French veterans, actor Jean Rochefort and the actor-singer Johnny Hallyday.
Oh yes, Johnny Hallyday.
I luxuriate in their expertise and their charm.
What's the movie about?
You could say it's about a man who gets off a train. He's a gangster. He stops in a small town. He meets this eccentric professor. He stays at the man's house. The two don't invite him, so click.
We have recently lost two people, at least, who were powerful figures in the history of American film. One was Gregory Peck. Remember Gregory Peck for me?
Well, Gregory Peck, and can I guess who the other one was? Okay. Well, they both. It's a truism to say when a star like Peck or Hepburn, and I would say there was no star like Hepburn, dies, that they took an era with them. I think it's especially true in Peck's case because he represented a liberal nobility that was both compassionate and masculine, of a sort that simply does not exist anymore. I would simply mention two of his films, both in 1962. One is Cape Fear, and the other To Kill a Mockingbird. And in both films, there's a climactic scene in which he has every right to lash out at someone who's done something terrible to him, kill the bastard. And in each case, he doesn't, because he thinks in one case that it's more important to hold back because his children are watching, and To Kill a Mockingbird. And the other, he does not want to kill the man who's hurt his family in Cape Fear, because he wants the man to experience the penalty of the law. He thinks it's not up to him to kill a man. I can't imagine a climax in American movies in the last an action film in the last 10 years where it would be seen as more manly, more heroic to spare a bad man's life. That just doesn't happen.
Because you want to see the state do it. You want to see the process.
No, I'm saying...
because he wants to see the criminal justice process. Yes.
What people think the audience want to see now is the bad guy get blown up in the most spectacular way.
It's also worth saying about Gregory Peck that when he was young, in the 40s, Spellbound, Keys to the Kingdom, Purple Plain, that there was never a more beautiful man. I don't think I'll be misunderstood if I say that in movies. Maybe Gary Cooper at the same point.
David Thompson, the critic, called him lethally handsome.
Unbelievable looking. I don't think he ever became that interesting an actor. It's what he stands for that's sort of more interesting than the performances themselves. Although he was in if you look at his list, there was a lot of entertaining movies like Guns and Navarone and was it 12 O'Clock?
12 O'Clock
High, the war movie. There are a fair number of
Demon Baby in The Omen.
The Omen.
Yeah. And then
Brazil.
didn't he play opposite Laurence Olivier in some film about?
He played Dr. Mengele.
Dr.
Mengele.
Yeah.
So he had a range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kate Hepburn.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying about Gregory Peck standing for as what he stood for and represented as much as how he acted, because I think Hepburn obviously represented a type of woman that had never been seen before and that she owns the copyright to. It's kind of touching and ironic and I don't know what, that we have Charlie's Angels and Legally Blonde 2 out this summer, which is this what she fought for, to have these kind of bubble girls when she was always a woman who was doing things, speaking her mind as a character and also as an actress, athletic. Her idea of sex was sparring verbally, was talking to Spencer Tracy, she wanted to embrace life in that kind of very brisk way that we don't see in in the roles that women actresses are playing today, and that is tremendously missed.
I think too, and one thing I was thinking about because of the coincidence of the closeness of their deaths, is that the movies that they made, which were enormously popular and were meant to appeal to the kind of mass audience, to be seen by everyone, and still can be appreciated by people of all ages, were movies about the behavior of adult people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is something that, when you think about it, especially in a summer season like this one, you see very, very seldom. I mean, the movies she made with Spencer Tracy, I mean, this idea of marriage as the combat between equals, and a character like Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird is representing adult behavior, what it is to be
and
to be grown up,
and to take responsibility for
the guys who are on the studios
doing.
are afraid of putting anyone on the screen who might possibly outclass anyone in the audience. And really, that's true. I mean, there's been the misinterpretation of democracy in some way.
My only question about that, David, is how do you know that? I mean, does it simply
by looking at the movies that are being made? They were always all through the 30s. People got dressed up and went out to dinner and sparred. Just what she's saying, playfully, verbally. Yeah. Where is that? It's sophistication as a mode.
But New Yorkers making fun of it.
Okay.
The rest of the country.
But my only point in asking the question that way is that, I mean, I would love to, because I'd like to have the executive on and confront him with this, is see the script and see the play, to see the script and to see the producer who wanted to do it and the director who wanted to do it, and say, why wouldn't you make this movie?
Well, Hepburn shaped the movies to herself. She bought Philadelphia Story for herself, and she changed the way the movies were made to show herself off in the way that she wanted to be seen. And who's doing that now?
Though, in the 30s.
In terms of being entrepreneurial,
but Hepburn as a Hepburn
character was unique. Playing her kind of slim, Bryn Mawrish, Eastern.
But if you're looking for actresses who embodied wit and intelligence and glamour, there were dozens of them.
Yeah. And in the 30s,
and you couldn't name one unless you bent the rules for.
And after all, only a minority of the audience. Only a minority of the audience went to college in the 30s. Now everyone goes, and yet
Say that again.
In the 30s, only a minority of the audience went to college. What, 20, 30% now? 60%
so you're
go.
Saying we don't get the movies we deserve.
And yet the intelligence level of the.
Well, and I think. But is that why is that? I mean, is it because that the people who go to the movies is not an audience that wants the same kind of movies that
this gets back
five of us want?
Economic
theory. The economic theory that it's all gauged to the opening weekend. It's 15 to 25-year-old boys who go on opening weekend. It takes much longer to attract older people. They go on by word of mouth, what their friends say on the telephone. And the suburbanites get there more slowly.
Movies were the main mass medium. Yeah. They were a family medium, which didn't mean the entire family went. There were pictures for everyone. But in 1946, 4 billion tickets were sold, and last year maybe 1.5 billion. So,
but was their DVD, video, computer, etc.
But you make your movies for your audience, and if your audience is 14-year-old boys who can't get dates, then on Friday nights you'll make pictures for them.
We were talking about Kate Hepburn and her own entrepreneurial spirit, and she made movies that identify with her. And we just had some praise for Clint Eastwood. Yeah. who has done just that with his own career, who's
Quietly,
served both ends.
steadily,
He's served both
independently.
ends. On the one hand, he's served commerce, pure commerce. On the other hand, he's made movies and taken chances. Some have not done well, and some have. And go ahead.
I think too that you see an interesting trend with some of the actors of this generation in the choices that they make, who are who will do a big action movie for the paycheck, but then who will go and do a more independent or smaller budgeted or more interesting.
Bruce Willis has done this.
Bruce Willis has done it. Julianne Moore has done this. I mean, and
George
Julianne Moore,
Clooney, Travolta did that.
And they bring some of their
off Hollywood film for actors is very encouraging. What there is the Hollywood film and the off Hollywood film, and there isn't something in between.
Now it's
what there
also
is
the director
what
doing that.
were the best
Soderbergh will
movies
do a
60
big
years ago.
picture and a small picture. We have it on the
and
directorial.
Soderbergh and Clooney are in partnership.
That's right.
Tell me the best movie you've seen in the last. Take your time. Last 2 or 3 years. Just
Last 2
what
years.
Whoa.
Take all day.
No, just give me something that you walked out of the theater. We may have already talked about it. All you got to do is name a title. Capturing the Friedmans may have been it. But just say something that was so totally satisfying to you on so many levels.
The movie that stays.
It may be in DVD, America.
The movie that stays with me, that I was in the minority for liking at the time, that David certainly disagrees with me about, that I picked as my #1 movie of 2001, that I still, every time it's on HBO, whenever I come into it, will watch for as long as I can, is AI, Steven Spielberg's AI.
You know, I've got to rewatch that because I didn't really watch it, and I started to buy it the other day. A, because I'm interested in artificial intelligence, A, and secondly, because Steven made it. Dave.
I had got an enormous amount of pleasure out of L.A. Confidential. That may be more than 3 years ago.
It is, but it's
four or 5 years.
I'm just trying to see.
6?
I'm trying to get into the audience at home a kind of movie that you like, that
was
really
rich
rang the bell for
in
you.
humor and sex and and performance and violence, all those good things. Right?
Yeah. I hope Kim is doing well because she was so sexy in that movie.
Yeah, she was great.
Lord of the Rings, 1
really?
and 2,
I agree with
magnificent. And the third part is coming out this winter. You're asking what we're looking for?
And they're saying it's better than the first 2?
I think it is a magnificent,
I agree.
a magnificent achievement.
Okay. And he is a terrific director and a terrific
Peter
guy.
Jackson, great.
The last year?
Don't pick it. The last 5 years, 10 years.
Well,
Just tell me a good
I'll
movie
tell you
that
the first one
resonated
that
with
came to
you.
mind.
All right.
Talk to her. Pedro
Really?
Almodovar.
Yeah,
I mean, that
I agree.
It astonished me with.
Have we redeemed ourselves for
Yes.
you? Okay, good.
And what have we learned in this segment? We've learned that critics read each other, as well as the fact that there are some good movies and lots of bad ones. It is a wonderful art form, and I'm always pleased to introduce movies to this audience. Thank you very much, each of you.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you, Charlie.
It was a lot of fun.
See you next time.